guys, I am Michaela Dice. I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us here on my podcast, Because You Belong Here. The purpose of this podcast is to talk about testimonies. I am a firm believer that your testimony should be someone else's prophecy. So we will be talking with some of my friends and family and people that I love about things that God has done in their lives, and I will be sharing different things about things that God has spoken to my heart and things that I've experienced through Him and His Word. And so I just wanted to tell you, grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and come hang out with us as we go deep, discovering the ways that God has proven His love in tangible ways. I am so excited you're here. All right. Hey guys, it's Michaela. I'm so excited to have you here. And today I am talking with my new friend, Angie Ochoa, about adoption and all of the things that come with that and the Lord's sweetness as we navigate some of these seasons and some of these things. So, Angie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share our adoption stories and just what God has done through those. I am a 54-year-old mother in Northern California. I'm married to my very best friend, my husband, Michael. And between the two of us, we have a total of 5 children, 2 of which are in heaven. My husband has a baby that lived for 2 weeks. And then I have a biological son who lived for 26 years, but both of them had very similar heart defects, which was very interesting that God chose to bring us together.
So wild.
It just is the craziest, but it just gave my husband such a clear understanding of what was going on with my son when we first met. So that was a huge blessing. And we homeschooled my biological son, Caleb, for 4 years and then put him in public school. And then our other kids, as they came along through adoption, through foster care, ended up starting out in public school. And then once COVID hit, we started homeschooling them, and we've just kept homeschooling them. I am very much an avid book reader. I love to read. I have challenged myself to read 100 books this year, and I've hit that challenge this month. I'm so excited.
Like August.
It's only
That's
August.
amazing.
I'm like, maybe I didn't make a big enough goal for myself.
That's fantastic.
I am a semi gardener, I guess you could say. I garden, but I don't have the greenest of thumbs. But we enjoy the fruits of my labor, and I just I'm a Christian. I have been following Christ since I was about 8 years old, and just have learned so much since then, especially through my husband and just even through adoption. It's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, so great. So all 3 of your adopted children were foster children,
Yes.
like through foster care.
Yes.
Okay, so how old were they whenever they came to you?
So our son, who is 17 now, is Eric, and he was 18 months when he came to us. And with him, it was our intent was to adopt. Like, we wanted to go into foster to adopt. And so we took that journey with him. And then our daughter, who is turning 15 in about a week and a half, Sophia, was 2.5 months when she came to us. And hers was also with the intent to adopt. And then our youngest, Benny, who is 10, was 3 weeks old when he came to us.
Oh, wow.
So that was just supposed to be emergency foster care, and it turned into permanence.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Okay.
became our son.
Yeah. That's amazing. So our older 2 were adopted through foster care as well. And we
Awesome.
had 8 months and 6 months.
Wow.
But we also went into it with the intent to adopt.
Yes.
Yeah. So the foster care system is a fun one to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what it's like. So some of what I like to talk about here is like the preparation process and what that looks like. And every state is so different with like their requirements and their studies and their, like all the things that you have to do. So, what did the home study process look like for you in preparation for foster care? Because adoption and foster care kind of do tend to be a little bit different, but not by a long shot, I think.
I'm not super familiar with the home study process for like a domestic or an international adoption.
Hmm.
But for us, for adopting through foster care, it was first of all, we took 3 full day classes on adoption through foster care, specifically for adopting foster kids. And then we took a full day of like CPR and first aid. And
Okay.
then we just had to get our home ready. We also went through an interview process with our caseworker, who is called our home finding worker. And she talked to all 3 of us at the same time. So at the time that we started this, it was my husband and myself and my biological son, Caleb, who was, I think he had just turned 12 at that point. And so we got our interviews all together, and then we each had to be interviewed separately. We
Mhm.
had to go through fingerprinting, we had the whole background check, and then they came and checked our home. And quite honestly, that was the part that worried me the most because I was like, I'm not the neatest person in the world. Like, we kept a clean house, but I'm a little bit of a crafter. And like I said, I love reading. So and my husband does too. So we have lots of books. And I was homeschooling at the time. And so it was like, oh, we're living in this 2 bedroom apartment with so much stuff in it. Are they even going to let us do this? But they did, because really they just were looking for a safe and loving environment.
Mhm.
And, the biggest thing was that we just needed to make sure that things that were unsafe, such as cleaning chemicals and things like that, were locked away,
Yeah.
and because we were requesting children who were 2 years and under, we made sure that they were put somewhere where, obviously the kids couldn't reach them. And so
Mhm.
we passed inspection, and I was grateful. I
That
think I
process
was
is super
also
nerve-wracking.
a little nervous about what my son would say in his individual interview, but it, he did fine. I mean, we got to adopt, so
Right?
yeah.
It's funny how much like that is such a nerve-wracking process to have them come into your home. Like it feels so vulnerable.
Yes, and
But
judged.
really, like you said, they're looking for a place that's loving
Yeah,
and safe. It doesn't like I was talking to someone else about this on another episode where we were talking about the fact that they come in and they say, like we had a caseworker. So our oldest son was 2, had just turned 2 when we started the process to adopt our second. And she came in and I remember being like, I'm so sorry. Like it's a mess. Everything's crazy. Because we had, a smaller apartment and a
yeah,
dog and a toddler. And I remember her telling me, Makayla, I would be more worried if your house was spotless because that means like you're more worried about what it looks like than living life with a toddler.
yeah.
And I was just like, oh, what a weight off my shoulders of remembering that moment of, and I mean, he's 12 now, so that was like 10 years ago. And it's something that's never left me, even just in parenting as a whole, of like, it's okay that my house looks lived in. I have 4 kids.
And I
And
think it extends beyond that parenting too into, like, we've learned biblical hospitality. Like, it doesn't matter what your home looks like. It doesn't have to be perfect. It
yeah,
just needs to reflect Christ in the biblical aspect, but in the adoption aspect, it needs to be a loving and clean home. If you're cleaning on a regular basis, then you've got it. I mean,
right. And
yeah.
that's like we're on a leadership team for our young adults ministry at our church, and we lead small groups. And we started leading the small group at our house when our baby was 6 months old, maybe. And I remember being like, this is it. Like, this is where we are. We have a sitter that comes and like hangs out upstairs with them sometimes, but you know, there's times where I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry, things are a mess. And it got to the point where I was like, I'm tired of apologizing, like this isn't just my life. Welcome to my life. Like,
That's right.
and it
I
makes
have
such
friends
an
that get
impact.
mad at me if I apologize. So
Yeah.
it's like, don't apologize.
Yeah. We just welcome people into the fold now. And it's like, hey, this is where we are.
Yeah,
You know, sure, we'll clean it up, but we're not like
exactly.
like scrubbing all the baseboards and like cleaning windows every day.
We don't have that one room that, I mean, we do, but we don't have that one room where everything gets put until company leaves. Just a quarter of the stuff.
Right? That was us. We had a baby shower on Saturday and we had everything shoved into our guest room. And I
Yep.
then made the kid pull it out because I was like, I can't even walk in here.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So funny. So,
Yeah.
what kind of advice would you give to someone who, I mean, especially like in California or anybody that is looking to make the decision to start and they feel overwhelmed by, say, the home study process and how vulnerable and overwhelming that feels like? What kind of things would you offer for like showing themselves grace?
Honestly, I think just pray. Just talk to God because He understands your fears about this. He understands your trepidation, your nervousness. Like He's going to give you peace about it if this is what He wants you to be doing. And it's kind of like the story about eating an elephant. You just eat it one bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
It's just you just take it a little bit at a time and definitely show yourself grace. Like we said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It
Mhm.
just needs to be within their parameters of what your home needs to look like. And you can talk to your caseworker if you've already gotten that far in the process. Say, what kinds of things are you looking for? What kinds of things do we need to make sure we've taken care of? Because they'll tell you. They're not going to keep that from you. And it's like a pop quiz, like, whoops,
Right?
we weren't expecting that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I mean, the giving yourself grace, like that's something that I have had to learn and I'm still learning because I'm not a perfectionist per se, but I am a control freak. So, ask my husband, ask my kids. I'm a control freak. Wait, you put that in the wrong spot. That's never gone there. But yeah, just I mean, the Lord just gives so much peace and so much grace. And if this is something that He wants you to do, it's it's going to happen. It's going to be something that you're going to feel it so much peace about.
Yeah. Okay, so what does your, we don't have to get super deep into it, but like what does your relationship, or is there a relationship at all with like biological families? I know that can be a tricky subject, so we don't have to go deep into it if you don't want to, but
We don't really have one. We did foster care aside from adoption, where we do have one family that we have an excellent relationship with. She's a single mom. She's had another baby since, and we do have a good relationship there. But with the others, we made it open adoption. Doesn't mean that we have to share our lives with them. It simply means that when the child is 18 years old, if they choose to go and look and find out about their birth parents, they can, which we're totally fine with. We have talked about their birth parents with them if they ask, but we just, especially for our youngest, who was in a very, very taken out of a very bad, very abusive situation, we made the choice to just not take any more of their calls. We took their calls when he was in foster care with us, but once that adoption hit, like we took calls up to a year after maybe, but they are just very dangerous people. And
yeah.
so we just felt like for our own safety, we needed to just kind of cut that off. With the other two, there's just been no desire from their side, but we've always been open to it because we feel like God has given this to us as a ministry. And
Mhm.
so we've been open to it so that we can be a witness, a testimony, but they've chosen not to have any further contact with us. So,
That makes sense. That's how it is with a couple of our children as well, where it's like, if you want to pursue that whenever you get old enough, then we are fine with that.
yeah.
But there's a lot of things there that
Yeah.
not safe scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally feel that. So what are some of the things that you would say for an adoptive parent, like working towards the process, or even somebody looking into going into foster care? What are some of the challenges that you feel like you had to navigate that you and your husband were able to navigate together that could be like a, hey, you should be prepared for this?
Be ready for the hurt because
Mhm.
it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt watching these parents continue to make wrong decisions that not only affect their child and the lack of reunification, but it's going to affect them. And even if they you don't even know what's going on in their lives, there's still the possibility of the pain because with our daughter, we were doing this thing like our daughter's bio mom was 13 when she had her, very, very young. And she was in foster care herself. And so we were asked to come alongside her and kind of parent her in a way, even like just through our visits, through visitation, just to be there for wisdom and knowledge and that kind of thing. And if she had questions, and just to kind of guide her. She didn't want to have any of that. Like, she was like, I already know all that. My sister's a mom. I already know, So we're like, that's okay, and just not taking that personally. That's one of the biggest things that I have had a challenge with. And my husband has been so gentle in telling me, don't take it personally. They're hurting. And we've all heard the saying, hurt people hurt people.
Right.
Um, and so when they're hurting and they say, I don't know why they placed my child with you. They could have placed my child with my mom. And yet they were in foster care themselves because of their mom or whatever, they're
Yeah.
going to say things to hurt you. It doesn't happen this way typically in, like, say, international adoptions, probably not very much in domestic adoptions going through an agency that isn't foster care, but man, doing it through the foster care route, be prepared to hurt, but also know that if this is what God wants for you, he's not going to leave you in
Yeah.
this. He's not going to necessarily take away the hurt, because he says in this world you will have trials and tribulations, but I have overcome the world, and he says that he'll never leave us or forsake us. So he's there with us. But for my husband and I, we had expectations of what our family should look like, and we had disappointments when we weren't able to get pregnant. And I thought, oh, I'm doing the right thing now, I'm following the right path, I'm following after God, and I should be able to get pregnant easily. And that didn't happen. But we didn't go after foster care and adoption just because we couldn't get pregnant. We went after it because both of us felt very strongly and had talked about it long before we had talked about marriage, that we wanted adoption to be a part of our lives.
Hmm.
So, and that's because of how God has adopted us as his own. So
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, is doing that. And that's why it's so important to be on the same page. If you and your spouse are not on the same page, it's really, really hard to navigate the whole adoption process.
Hmm. Well, that's one of the things. So I think I've probably said this on every episode I've done about adoption because I think it's such an important thing to remember, but that God did not create adoption as his design. Like, he never designed families to be broken. He never created the concept of family to be broken, like for the things that have to happen to result in adoption
Right.
via foster care, or even just like the most ideal situation of a domestic infant adoption. Like, that's not necessarily like he didn't design it that way, but he works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And those things become purpose, right? Like that becomes that brokenness becomes the purpose. And I think that like what you're talking about there is so indicative of that, that like you can't say this is like, I don't think any adoptive family could ever say this is easy,
No.
like it's just that's just the nature of brokenness, right? And so finding the Lord in the middle of it, teaching our children their identity as children of God in the middle of the spaces where they have so many questions,
Yeah.
so many things where they're like, why did this happen to me? Why didn't they love me? Why didn't they want me? And like trying to figure out how to navigate it, especially coming from foster care like we did, where it's like, I don't have answers to all of your questions.
Yeah.
One of our adoptions was a domestic infant adoption, and I can very specifically tell that child, your birth mother just loved you so much that she wanted more for you than she could give. Like she just like this was a decision for her. Whereas with the others, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what happened. It's not because they didn't love you. I can't guarantee that, but I can say that I don't know. But you're
Yeah.
loved. Like the Lord loved you enough to say that you could come to a family that was going to be loving and safe.
Yeah.
Not perfect by any stretch of the
Right. Still
imagination.
broken. Still so broken.
Yes. Yeah.
It's been such an amazing picture of God's love for us, in that as broken as we are, he still chose us to
Amen.
be his very own. We are joint heirs with Christ, meaning that we share in the same riches that he bestows on Christ.
Mhm.
Like we get everything. We get the inheritance. The same thing that Jesus does, So
Yeah.
this has been, our my oldest has never asked about birth parents. Never.
Wow.
He's never wanted to know. I don't know if it's his cognitive challenges that he has, but he's never asked. My daughter went through a phase where I think maybe in first or second grade, where she wanted to talk about her birth mom all the time, and she wanted to meet her, and she would talk about her like she was her real mom, which technically, yes, she is.
Right.
But, that's another thing that you have to be prepared for in the hurt,
Yes.
because it's like, they could be saying, even if you get them at 3 weeks old, or even if you get them at 2.5 months, they could say, "You're not my real mom," and that's hurtful. My daughter has never said that. None of my kids have ever said that,
Oh,
which I'm
great.
super thankful for. But when she was going through that phase where she was asking all the questions, it was like, here I was taking it personally again, like, what, am I not enough for you? So yeah, and it just has given us such an opportunity to teach our kids about God's love for us,
Mhm.
that he chose us, that he pulled us up out of that bad, broken situation that we were in, and he made us his own. So that's been such a huge blessing for us, for me to even recognize that. Like, I think my husband recognized that way earlier. I've been in church my whole life. I became a
Yeah.
Christian and was baptized at 8 years old, but it took this long for me to recognize that it took the adoption of our own children to truly see that. And that just has been amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, that right there is exactly why I do this, because I think it's so important to identify those things. Like you said, like you've known the Lord since you were 8, but it takes like experiences. And I say, like I tell people all the time that I feel like scripture and experience aren't mutually exclusive. Like scripture is alive, like it is a living, breathing entity that comes alive as we experience things and we identify his workings in our life through the stories that he weaves.
Yeah.
And adoption is such a sanctifying process. Like I know parenthood as a whole is,
Yeah.
but really there's a whole different slew of things that come with adoption where it's like
Yeah.
the Lord, his sweetness is just overwhelming,
Yeah, for sure.
you know? Like those things that become tangible to you through all the things when you're like, "Oh, oh,
Oh, yes.
yeah, this makes sense for real."
Yeah, that makes so much sense now. Yeah,
Right? That
yeah,
conversation of, "Oh, I only thought I knew that before."
right. Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to get a punch in the face to really know it,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. I learn things the hard way all the time.
Yeah, it's real life. Hey guys, I just wanted to real quick take this moment to let you know about scripture journals that I've been writing. I will include the links in the show notes for them, but I love to study scripture one at a time and in depth. So I have included spaces to write it in different translations, and then at the bottom of each page, there is a box for you to use the Strong's Concordance or maybe the Blue Letter Bible app to study the in depth original meanings for the words in the scriptures. And then there are questions that I put a lot of thought into for the practical application of each scripture. So I hope that you are able to gain a better understanding of different scriptures and how to apply them and how to make them meaningful in your own life. And like I said, I'm including the links in the show notes, or you can search for my name on Amazon.
Yep.
So, how has your marriage, like, how has adoption affected your marriage? And, like, what has that process looked like for you and your husband?
I think, like I mentioned before, my husband and I had these expectations of what our family was going to look like. Here we had my biological son that my husband, took as his own in our marriage ceremony. He gave him a ring and everything. And we thought, oh, it's going to be easy to get pregnant. Oh, it's going to, we're going to be able to do this. And we want this type of child. And this, even going into the whole foster to adopt process, our thoughts were towards a girl because we already had a boy. And so we were like, oh, we want a girl, we want a girl, we want a girl. And our pastor at the church that we were going to at the time had preached a sermon. And I don't remember exactly what the sermon was, but it really changed my mind because I was like, you know what? I, we will take whatever the Lord gives us, whether it's a boy or whether it's a girl. We can't, like, if I was going to get pregnant, I couldn't say, Lord, I really only want to get pregnant if I'm going to have a girl, So it was like we needed to open it up. Excuse me. And one of the things I think, because my husband and I were older when we got married, we were almost 34. I was almost 34. He was 35. I think we came into it a little more settled and also with hopefully a little more wisdom, but I think our wisdom has grown significantly since then. But I think that just navigating this together has grown us closer
Hmm.
because it hasn't been easy. And I don't have like close girlfriends that I would go and talk to about these things. I talk to my husband. He truly is my best friend. And so just being able to navigate this together, like he's such a balance for me. Like I'm super emotional, he's super calm, and he's the one that's able to do, like, to talk to me rationally and say, think about this logically, think about this rationally, you know, not like, calm down. Aren't you being a little, over dramatic or whatever? But just reminding me of, God's hand in all this, God's peace and his purpose in our lives, and just how, like you said, he works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And so having him next to me, I can't imagine doing this with anybody else. Like
Yeah.
I could not go through this, especially foster to adopt process
Yeah.
without him. Like he has just been so strong in it all, and he took the little ones to visits a lot because with our daughter, visits were in a very dangerous part of town.
Yeah.
Um, so, we're like, close to Oakland and Richmond, which are kind of rough areas of California.
Mhm.
And so him having knowledge of that area and being able to get off work and drive us to these visitations, it was like,
Very nice.
it was phenomenal because I was like, I don't think I could do this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, he would take off for our youngest, he would take off half day because bio mom and dad's visits were separate. They were not allowed to be together. And
Oh
quite
no.
often they were late or were no show at all, you know, so he was losing half a day's pay. And it, you know, it's just like, oh, these are times when we really need to come together and we really need to trust the Lord. And, you know, just walking through it together has been, it, it's been necessary. It really has. And I think it's forged a stronger bond between us.
Yeah. I love that. How did that look like with Caleb? Like how did Caleb kind of adjust to that life as a big brother via foster care?
So I was a single mom for 10 years, and my mom and dad were the ones, mostly my mom, who watched Caleb, and she homeschooled him for the first however many years of his life.
Oh
And
wow.
so he was always around other kids. He was around my younger siblings, and, you know, my younger sister is 11 years younger than me. So he wasn't that much younger than her, you know, so he's always been around other kids. He's always been around big family. And I think he just was so excited to have a sibling, you
Yeah.
know, and he was very, very, I guess, invested in what happened with them. You
Yeah.
know, even with his cognitive challenges, he understood what was going on. He was so invested and he just loved being a big brother. I mean, some of the pictures that I look back at, I'm just like, oh, my heart. They just, yeah. So, dynamics changed a little bit later as the oldest got older and they had to share a bedroom, and you know, it was a little more sibling rivalry there, but that happens in every family where there's siblings. So
Yeah.
you know, they were true siblings.
Mhm. How sweet that he got to experience that. Like, I love that that is something that you were able to have as a mom is like experience that for a while, like to have that
He was
relationship.
such a good big brother to them, mostly when they were littler and they couldn't like push back at him and say, no, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to do what you say or whatever. But
Right.
he had such an amazing relationship with our youngest, and he was like his advocate and his protector. And because my youngest had been severely abused
Mhm.
at 9 days old, and Caleb was so angry about that and so indignant. And, you know, just the thought of our youngest like going back to that family just was outrageous for us to even think about. And so he would get angry about that, you know. So it was like they had such a special relationship. Just, I mean, they got their time together because he was still living at home up until January of 2019 when he was finally able to move out on his own. And so while the other two were at school and our youngest was still just 4 years old and not in kindergarten yet, they got to spend so much time together. And it just was so, so sweet. I have some really wonderful pictures and memories. And yeah, it was a blessing.
Yeah, that's so great. Mm, I love that so much. So, so sweet. Like we said, like the sweetness of the Lord in those hard places, like to bring in those moments where you just get to see him shine,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
I love it. Okay, so what are some of the ways that you've seen the Lord move through your adoptions? We've kind of touched on some of that, but like, is there anything that you learned to be true about him as he's walked through this process with you, or any of the challenges specifically where it's like, we encountered this and he was here in this way? Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense. I feel like there's so many like huge like stories that I could tell about his goodness and his faithfulness through these adoptions, because when we had gotten our son at 18 months, who's now 17, I had been taking our oldest, Caleb, to physical therapy and occupational therapy because he had had strokes when he was 2 years old. And so he needed, and speech therapy, I believe. He needed all these therapies. So we were taking him to a private, not private, it was within the school system, but like a therapy place where he would go and receive his therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone there and seen this older woman who reminded me of my mom because she had all these kids of different ages with her. And they were all like different ethnicities, and she had this baby that was about 6 months old in the stroller. And I was like, oh, can I hold him, please? I was like, are you a foster mom? And she says, yes, I am. And I said, what's his story? And so she shared his story with me. And I was just like, and she said, he's probably not going to track with your face. He's probably not going to track with toys. He doesn't like really do any of that. He just kind of stares out into space. Excuse me. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And she had told us that he had been neglected, kept in a car seat for those first 6 months of his life, and even had like a bottle propped up so that on his car seat so that he would get his sustenance, right?
Yeah.
And it broke my heart. And so about a year later, we get this call from our home finding caseworker, and she says, I think we found a baby for you, a little guy. And we had had calls before and they just didn't work out. We weren't chosen. And she started telling me this story, and I was like, this sounds familiar. But I'd heard all of these stories about these other possible kids that we were going to get. And I was like, but was it one of them? Or I don't even remember. So we went further along into the process, and we got to go meet this little boy. And as we were rolling up to the house, I told my husband, I said, I think I've I think I know who this is. And sure enough, we get up to the door and this lady opens the door. And I was like, I know you. I've met you before. And I've held him. Like, that was my son that the Lord allowed me to hold a year before. And it just like, sorry, it totally blew me away that
Yeah.
he gave me the opportunity to hold this baby at 6 months old that was going to be for my forever child. It was just like, only God could allow something like that to happen. It was just amazing, because these things, like, they don't, they don't happen.
Right.
So, oh my goodness, that was just, one example, but just trusting, God. Like, I feel like the Lord has given us so many opportunities to see where something that feels like a disappointment to us has been kind of a seatbelt. That's what we call it in our house. It's a seatbelt. It's for our protection, and it's because God has something different for us. And
Yeah.
so we learned that after we had him for a year, we ended up adopting him about a year and 3/4 after we got him. And we're like, I don't think his adoption had been finalized yet. And we were told after a year of a child being with you, you can ask for another, you can apply to get another. And so we were like, okay, but let me backtrack a little bit. With that adoption, we told them that we would be okay with mild to moderate special needs, because with our son Caleb, we were going through the mild to moderate special needs with him. And so we thought, if we are going through this with him, then the Lord's going to walk through this with us with another one. We can do this. And
Yeah.
so we chose to have mild to moderate special needs. And he did. He came to us at 18 months, where he was still on a bottle and he was still eating stage 2 baby food. He would hold food on his tongue because he could not handle the textures. And he would just pour the drool because he was like, get this out of my mouth. It was like, just holding it there. And so We went through a lot of therapies with him. We've gone through, he had an IEP, which is an individualized education plan in the public schools. He still is homeschooling, at the same level as my 14-year-old, and both of them are a little bit behind. So we were okay with that. Now, when we went for our second one, we were like, okay, this time we really do want a girl. So can we please, can we try for a baby girl? And they're like, yes, of course. So we said this time, no special needs, please. Because right now we feel like we have more than we can handle or enough,
Right.
And so we submitted in August of 2009. And then in late September, early October, I had made a visit to the doctor because I thought I might be pregnant. I had gone 9 weeks without my cycle, and I was never like irregular. And so I thought, okay, I might be pregnant. So I went to the doctor and it was negative. And I went out into my car and I sat down and I cried, and I cried out to God, and I said, God, I trust you. Like, I don't know what your plan is. I'm super bummed. I don't understand, but I trust you. Whatever it is that you want us to do, then it's okay. I'm okay with that. And we got a call that afternoon about a baby girl. I kid you not. I I just was like, what? And I feel like God was just wanting me to surrender my heart to him and just trust him, and know that, he has a plan, and it's such a good plan. He's such a good father. And so we were put up with 12 other families, and we were not too hopeful because they said, we want you to come alongside this young lady because she's only 13 years old, and we want you to kind of be a parental kind of guide with wisdom and that kind of thing. And so we were like, yeah, we're totally up for it. She was younger than Caleb, our older son, so it was just like, okay, this is strange, but we can do this. And we were headed out to family retreat with our church, and I got a phone call from our home finding caseworker, and she said, you guys are it. You're the ones that they chose. And I was like, like I screamed. I think our whole apartment complex probably heard it because I was so excited. But yeah, I mean, that journey was still interesting because we were still doing visitations. And I had to just be okay with her not liking me, the birth mom. And, we went through the challenge of her kind of trying to flirt with my husband during the visitations. And it just was like, this is so crazy. Like, she would completely give me the cold shoulder. And, I just, again, that whole taking things personally, I just was like, I need to get past this. I need to learn like something, obviously. But she thought that she would get to plan birthday parties with us and things like that. And when they told her that that's not how it worked, she ended up running away from the foster home that she was in. So, but just, in these stories, and like with Benny, our youngest, we honestly thought we were doing emergency foster care. We thought that he was going to go with his grandma on his mom's side. And we were fearful because the daughter was, or her, his bio mom was not a safe person. His bio dad was not a safe person. We were so concerned about him going back. Nobody had told us anything until his adoption ceremony. Like, at his adoption ceremony, was it the adoption ceremony? I said to the lawyer, I said, or to the caseworker, we were so worried because we weren't sure we were going to even get to adopt him. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, nobody told us that, anything. Like, as far as we knew, he was going back to family. He was going with the grandmother. And they're like, oh no, they would have never let that happen. And I'm like, somebody could have told us this.
a long time to be that stressed out.
Right. I mean, it was like a year and a half. Like we were so stressed out, just like, is he going to go back? Like we were in tears just at the thought of him going back to that. And, and we found out that even though he wasn't supposed to see his birth mom outside of the supervised visits, that when he would get off campus visits with his grandma, that she was allowing the birth mom to come and see him, and so now here the grandma is not being honest. And so we were like, how is he going to go back to this? Like, this is so bad. And Caleb was so upset over that. He just, so we're like, Caleb, we have to trust God in this. Like, I don't know if he's going to end up being ours, but eventually he did. And, we celebrate every year our kids' adoption dates, and we go out to dinner as a family, and it's just, it's, God has just been so good through all of this, all of it. Like, I can't look back and see any time where he wasn't with us through all of this.
He's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
So good. Yes.
I love that I get to share these stories with people, because it is that like adoption is messy and it's hard and all the things. And like, I've been really feeling convicted lately to start talking about stories when we're in the middle of them.
Yeah.
Because so many times, like before I started talking about specifically adoption stories, I was just talking about testimonies. They were amazing, like the episodes that I did before. And I still have a few that are trickled in and out, but it's so easy to sit on the other side of a story and say, oh, I see that he was there. He was there. Like we're on the other side, and now I can say, oh,
Yeah.
so good. He's so
Hindsight,
good.
right? 2020.
Right. And so I've been trying to train myself and talk more to people about like, this season sucks. Like, this is really hard.
Yeah.
But he's here. And finding him in the little pockets of the day and the little spaces where it's like just that sweetness of him being with you, instead of saying, oh, I can feel now that it's over. I know that he was walking with me, but saying, I'm struggling, but I still feel him here. Like I still find him here.
Yeah.
And I feel like the whole of adoption, because honestly, there's not a season in adoption that is like, oh, that season's over. Like that's just
It's not
of it.
It's
And
never over.
it's never over. Like this is a lifelong commitment to being a parent.
Yeah.
In a mess. And that's his goodness, I feel like, when we can acknowledge it. Like we can say, I, as a parent, struggle with frustration. I struggle with,
I struggle with anger. I yell at my kids all the time.
Right.
So yeah.
And we have a moms group at our church where we last year we would all gather, and it was for moms who specifically had kids like ages 5 and under. And the woman who ran it, like one of my friends, she was asking older moms to come in and talk to us to remind us that like the grace of the Lord trumps your yelling.
Yeah.
Like, we all think we're messing up our kids every day of our life, right? Like,
right. I do. I constantly think that. And my husband reminds me, that God even uses my failures to sanctify me, to sanctify my husband, to sanctify my children. So, and he doesn't need me to be this perfect mom in order for my kids to come to know him. In fact, they need to see me saying, you know what? I'm so sorry I yelled at you. I'm so broken and I so desperately need Jesus, because then they're going to see they don't have to be perfect. They're going to see that even in their sinful state, that they need Jesus and that he's there for them. And I tell you, one of the biggest things that has been a blessing for us in our adoption journey is that we've been going to the same church almost since we started. but definitely since we actually got Eric in 2008. And it's so incredibly important to have that community around you, and not just a community of friends, but a community of believers who also see the goodness of God and who God uses as vessels that can uphold us in the hard times. I mean, our church has blessed us phenomenally. And by our church, I mean so many people in the church. They provided meals for us, they did showers for us, they have just been there. They've brought diapers and they've brought, the things that we needed, like car seats and strollers. And we were given so much stuff, and I just feel like just that surrounding, like there's actually an organization in this area called Foster the City, and it's where churches are taught to come around foster parent and just to be there and to do the things for them, whether it's respite care or whether it's just bringing diapers and formula or whatever it is. And so having that strong faith community is so important. It's You
Yes.
could do it without it, but I wouldn't I wouldn't suggest it. I mean, it's just
No.
our church has been amazing. Like even through Caleb's death in October 2019, like they've come around us, they've surrounded us with prayer and with everything that we could possibly need. Like it's just you cannot there's a reason why God says for us to not forsake the assembling together of the saints, right? Because we need each other. And,
Absolutely.
they have opportunities to point us to Christ, and we have opportunities to point them to Christ. And, I think that people have been impacted by our decision to adopt, because we've had other people that have chosen to adopt after hearing our stories. And I don't say that to brag on me. I say that to brag on Christ, because it's
Yeah.
only because of him. It's not me, it's not my husband, not at all.
No, I feel that. That's amazing. That's how our church is. We did not have community to this level.
Yeah.
Like we were drowning for a very large portion of the beginning of
Oh,
like two adoptions. And then we had some community, but it wasn't like super solid. But the church that we're at now, like I think three of our pastoral staff have adopted children.
wow.
And they started a ministry called Because of Love, where
Uh,
they have grants where they help people adopt. They have a prayer team that whenever you get a new foster child or you're going through the adoption process, you're able to call and they offer, like, they bring meals to you if you have a new foster child or you bring in a baby or whatever that may be. You're going through a hard time with all the things. They come over and build bunk beds for emergency foster placements.
yeah,
They do all these things. And it's like,
yep.
we went to the first dinner where they were talking about it, and I just sobbed. And I was like, telling my
Uh,
husband, I just wish, like, how different our life would be if we had had this, like, how better things would have been. And like being able to be part of that and like watch
yeah.
it happen and watch this form and like come alongside with people in a way because we understand it now,
Yep.
and like being able to be part of that and just watch it is just, it is such a huge key component whenever I talk to anybody about adoption. Like, be plugged in.
Yeah.
You can't
Even
do this
for
if you're not.
regular parenting, you need to be plugged in. Like just for marriage life, you need like
Yeah.
we all need the body of Christ, because we all have our different tasks. We are all, somebody's the hands, somebody's the feet, somebody's the brain. It's none
Yeah.
of us are unnecessary. We are all necessary.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, this was so beautiful. Thank you
Aw,
so much for sharing with me. I'm really excited for everybody to hear this.
thank you for
Appreciate
having
you.
me.